Hi, welcome back again to another exciting tutorial with me, Romy Fauzi. And in this episode, I'm going to explain how to create or show how to create a ladder system to our previous project, this 2.5D physics platformer project. So I'm going to continue where we left off. So I'm going to open the file 2D platform physics mecha 2 here, and then I'm going to add a ladder. So I've created a ladder beforehand and save it as a prefabs here. I'm going to drag this onto the scene here. Then I'm going to move the object, and this is actually quite easy to make because this is the ladder consists of a lot of cubes here. With the scale, by scaling the cube also for the side here, and then place them accordingly, and then parent them into an empty object and another parent for the empty object. So this is the hierarchy for the ladder. Just make sure it is like this, and then I'm going to put this ladder probably here. Okay, this is the lowest already. So I'm going to create another empty game object under the ladder. So I'm going to drag this here. So this game object become the child of the ladder, and then I'm going to change the name to ladder trigger, and then I'm going to add a box collider. So I'm going to use a box collider here, and I'm going to reset the transform position to 0, 0, 0 on the those three axes. Okay, so here we go, and I'm going to scale on the y-axis. So I'm going to make sure that scale of the y-axis is so it covers the ladder. So maybe around that 2.98, and then I'm going to round the z values, and then I'm going to scale the x-axis to around 0.87. So here we have a nice looking collider, and make sure this collider is tagged as is trigger for the box collider. And then I'm going to add a ladder as the tag. I've created this tag beforehand, so if you haven't created this before, just click add tag and then add a new ladder tag for it. So I thought I've renamed the object, so I'm going to rename this again. Okay, we have renamed that. And then I'm going to go to the character. Oh, sorry, before that I'm going to create a new FSM for the ladder trigger. So just right click, and then here I'm going to add an action trigger event for triggering the for check if the character is triggering this collider. So add trigger event, and then on trigger enter I'm going to choose the player as the collider tag, and here wait player to enter as the state name. I'm rename that. Then I'm going to create a new state, wait player to exit. So, and then I'm going to create a tag called player an event called player enter, and then another event for player exit. So add those transition, player enter on top on the first state, and for player exit on the second state, and then link this back and forth like that, and then I'm going to copy this trigger event to the second state and make sure this is on trigger exit. For the first state, send the event to player enter, and for the second state, send event to player exit. Okay, this will be all for now, and we are going to revisit this FSM, and I'm going to give it the FSM name called player trigger. I'm going to back to our character here, and then I'm going to create a new FSM, and this is ladder climbing. You can give any name you want to, but I'm going to choose this. So here I'm going to create two global event. So this is a global event of ladder, and then the second one is on ladder. See that this event automatically got checked for the global settings because I've already created before. So if you haven't, just check this checkbox as to set that event as a global event. So for the first state, I'm going to add a global transition of ladder, and then I'm going to create a new state for the second state here, and then add global transition on ladder as the global transition, and then here I'm going to give it a name wait, and here I'm going to name this state on ladder, and then maybe I'm going to create another event called climb. Oh sorry, this already been used, so I'm going to use another ascend, as in ascending. Okay, and then I'm going to add that ascend transition, and I'm going to add another state and call this climbing. I'm going to connect this ascend transition to our climbing state. Here I'm going to check whether the player are pressing button. So I'm going to use get key down here, and then the first one I'm going to check whether the player is pressing up or down. And then I'm going to copy this action and then choose the down arrow for the second get key down action. Just going to okay, there is it. And both for this action I'm going to send event to ascend here. So we have already done that, and upon ascending we are going to add a FSM disable. I'm going to disable another FSM, so I'm going to use enable FSM, and for this use owner I'm going to disable the movement, and then I'm going to copy this FSM, and then I'm going to disable the jumping event here, and then I'm going also to disable the gravity, so I'm going to search for use gravity action here, and then disable gravity. Okay. And then I'm going to add a set velocity, and then I'm going to set the y-axis to our vertical axis, because we've already record the vertical axis in our game manager here. As you can see, we are always retrieving our horizontal axis and our vertical axis. So go back to the ladder climbing, and I'm going to use the vertical axis here. Okay, right. Next we are going to go back to our ladder object, and then for the ladder trigger I'm going to use a send event action here to a game object FSM, and then I'm going to specify game object and choose our character from the scene. So where is our character? That is our character here, and then choose ladder climbing, and then off ladder for the first event here, and I'm going to copy the event here, the first state, even from the first state, and then I'm going to paste it on the second state, and then I'm going to choose on ladder here for the send event. Okay, let's have a try. Save the file, and then I'm going to try, see how it's look. So there, as you can see, it moves, but somehow it moves all the way. So let's see what went wrong. Go back to ladder climbing, and then here we have disabled our movement, and we have also disabled our jumping event. Disabled. Okay, for set velocity we have to set every frame, so when the vertical axis became 0 it will stop. And then I'm going to reset our rotation while facing while on the ladder. So I'm going to use set rotation here, and then for the set rotation I'm going to set the Y angle to 0, and I'm not going to check every frame, so leave other parameters as is. Save it again, and let's try it again. Okay, so we have already set our scene, and it's working nicely, the basic method. So next we are going need to set another action. So here I'm going to add a set parent, and then for the wait state I'm going to also set parent here, and here I'm going to also use a trigger event, and for trigger I'm going to choose ladder as the tag, and then I'm going to store the collider here. So I'm going to reorder this, and then I'm going to create another game object here. So I'm going to create a ladder obj ladder object as a new variable, and set that variable as a game object, and then I'm going to store that collider here. As we enter the ladder, it will know that it will store the object here. So, and then next I'm going to set the parent to ladder object, but here we are going to leave this as to none, and then we are going to need to create a couple collider here for canceling our ladder. So I'm going to create another game object. I'm going to copy this ladder trigger, and then here I'm going to change its name to ladder bottom, and then also to scale the y-axis to probably 0.5 or maybe a smaller value, 0.2, and then I'm going to place this collider on the bottom part of the ladder here, as you can see. So I'm going to put this here, and then here on player enter, we are going to, oh, I think this is already correct because this is actually the same. On player enter, it will send the on ladder, and as we can see here, our ladder climbing on ladder, it will go back to the state if that happens. So when we enter this ladder bottom collider from perhaps from above, and it will reset this state back to on ladder, so we can move so this is enabled again. Okay, here I'm going to copy use gravity, and then I'm going to paste this here, and I'm going to enable use gravity. Okay, let's see. And there you go, we can go up. Oh, sorry, there seems to be a problem still here. Let's see what is the problem. Okay, this is use gravity, should be okay. This is, okay, let's see our bottom here. Trigger event, player enter, ladder, is on ladder. Okay, going back to our character ladder climbing here, I'm going to divide our vertical axis value here. So I'm going to use a float divide, and then choose our vertical axis, and I'm going to divide this by 3 and check every frame. It should be working actually, so let's see if it's working. There. Oh, okay, there is a problem here. Let's check what went wrong. I'm going to play this back again, and then go to our ladder climbing here. So let's see. Okay, we can go back. Oh, okay, so this is a problem here. So upon entering, it will send us to on ladder, but upon exiting here, it will go back to the first state, and it will trigger the send event to off ladder. So now in our off ladder for the character, we need to enable back our gravity. So I'm going to copy this value here, and then I'm going to paste this use gravity back. So it should run this time. Okay, here. Oh, okay, I'm going to check this first, why went wrong. So this is actually what went wrong. In our ladder bottom here, we are going to remove this off ladder event. We are not going to need that. And here we are going to remove the exit trigger and just going to send on ladder, and then we are going to change this to finish here. So it's a one way. When the player enter, it will go to our on ladder event. So let's try this. It should work. There, we can go up, and we can go down, and we can walk again. So it's nice. As you can see, it's working. Now we are going to need to create a collider on top of the ladder, and this will act as a collider, but we are going to detect when the character goes up, and we are going to send a raycast to the above collider here. It will disable the collider, and after we went through that collider, it will enable it again, so we can stand on top of the ladder. So let's do that. I'm going to just copy this ladder bottom object, and then I'm going to change its name to ladder collider, and then I'm going to move this object to the top here. Make sure it's on the very top, and then I'm going to disable this box collider. But before, I'm going to change this name. So for layer enter, and then for the second state, I'm going to change its name to send on ladder. Okay. For tidiness sake, so we are not going to confuse later when we need to fix things here. And this, I'm going to remove this, also remove this one. I'm going to create two new event, one called enable collider, and the second one is called disable collider. Here I've already set this as a broadcast, so make sure you do that also. And then for the first one, I'm going to set disable collider. On the second transition, I'm going to set this as enable collider. So this is for the first state. I'm going to set the name of it to enable collider, and the second set to disable collider. So this will act for switching, for toggling the collider of the ladder collider here. So for enable collider, I'm going to drag this box collider here, and I'm going to set its property enabled to check, make sure this is checked for the first property, and for the second state property, just copy paste those action, and then I'm going to disable this enabled checkbox. And for the ladder collider, we are going to need to assign a different tags for it. So I'm going to change this to ladder collider. I've already prepared it before, but if you haven't do so, if you haven't do it, then just add another tag called ladder collider. And for the character, we are going to need to create a new FSM. So this second set FSM is going to also handle ladder, but I'm going to change its name to ladder raycast. So these FSMs are going to handle how are we going to check if the character is below the collider or on top of the collider. So first, we are going to use raycast action. So I'm going to use the raycast action here, and then the direction, I think the y-axis to 1, and maybe the distance to also 1. And before setting it, I'm going to run this so I can see the line, the raycast line. Oh, sorry, I haven't checked this, so I'm going to enable. Okay, I think this is too long, so I'm going to make this shorter. Maybe, oh, this is 0.75. Okay, and the axis, the direction is correct. Okay, next, go back to our ladder raycast here, and then I'm going to give this state name raycast up, I'm going to check whether we hit an object or not. So I'm going to create a new variable called hit collider and name set the type to game object, and then I'm going to store this hit object to hit collider. So we are going to get that object, and then I'm going to compare game object. So I'm going to use a game object compare tag, and then this I'm going to set it to hit collider and set the tag to ladder collider. So we are going to make sure if the raycasts are colliding with our ladder collider object, and if it's true, we are going to disable the collider. So add an event called disable collider, and then here add that transition. Okay, we are going to create two different states for detecting. So before if it's true, I'm going to disable the collider and make sure this is run every frame, so it will check every frame. For the first state, I'm going to give this a name down with the symbol chew up disable collider here. But before that, we are going to need to create two different float variables. So I'm going to change the type to float, and then this is the char y, so the character y position, and this is for the hit collider y. Okay, so here we are going to use get position, and then I'm going to use the owner to get the y position the car, set that every frame, and get another position for our hit collider and store that on the y axis on the hit collider y. But don't check every frame, because our hit colliders stays on top of it, doesn't move, so we don't need to check every frame of it. We only need to store it once, and then we need to compare the float compare. So the first one is car y and the second hit collider y, and I'm going to use change the tolerance to 0.3. Here I'm going to change the transition event to finished, and then for the greater than, I'm going to send to finish and leave the equal and less than to none here, and then add our another send event action, but we are going to send to our hit collider. And for the hit collider, let's see our ladder collider here. I'm going to change this FSM name, enable disable collider, and I'm going to copy the name, go back to our character here, and under send the FSM name, I'm going to paste that name here, and we are going to use this enable and disable collider here. I have another disable collider, but this I'm not using it, so the one with space here. So here I'm going to disable the collider, rename this disable collider, so we can we know what that action does. And then here I'm going to enable collider, and then I'm going to copy the send event here action, because we already set that FSM name and the other stuff, so we don't need to type it again. So rename this to enable collider, and then send the event to enable collider here. Okay, and I'm going to reset our hit collider game object. So I'm going to set the set game object here, choose hit collider and set this to none, set that to none. Okay, go here, and then I'm going to finish this and go back to raycast up here. Okay, let's see if it's working. Okay, oh, it's not working yet. Okay, let's check what went wrong here. Ladder raycast. Got to show the debug line and set the distance to 0.05, 0.75 I meant. Here we are disabling, we are getting the position, and we are comparing that position. So if the character is greater than our hit collider, go to finish. Oh, sorry, we have to make sure that this every frame is checked, and we are go back to our enable collider here. So let's try that. There we have our raycast. Oh, what went wrong? Here, as you can see, it's working nicely, but we have a problem here. The character is distorted because we parent our character to the ladder here, the ladder of obj, and by parenting we are parent our character to this object, the ladder trigger. And if we see the ladder trigger, we have a scale here, so we should not change the scale of this object, but we should change our collider scale. So I'm going to set this to 0.85, and okay, I think that's about right. So this, let's try it again. There's something wrong with our detection here, because it's somehow there, as you can see, it's not working nicely. Let's check what went wrong. So okay, I found a problem here. Choose our character and then go to ladder raycast here. Here I've changed the tolerance to 0.75, but the best value for our character is 85, and this is more or less our the height of the character. So the tolerance is the height for the character. Just try any values that suits your character on your scene here, and then I think that will be all here. And let's see if it's working. So there, as you see, we can stand on our ladder there. So on top of our ladder we can stand. Okay, so next I'm going to duplicate this ground here and move this ground to the side here or near the ladder, and then change the scale to around 4. or maybe 5. Yep, that's about right. So we can go to the left after we climb the ladder. Okay, I'm going to save the scene, and next we are going to deal on our animation. So go to our asset folder, and I'm going to choose this object, this model. So I'm going to click select here. There you go. And then I'm going to add a new animation. I've created the ladder climbing animation, and I've also put it below here in the description if you want to, so you can download the new character and then name this ladder climbing. Set the start value to 431 and the end value to 470, and then I'm going to loop the time, loop the pose here, and also check every single of this checkbox here, and then click apply. And then I'm going to add another and take animation, give the name ladder freeze, and set the start frame to 431 and the end frame to 400 also 31. So we have a freezing on ladder pose, and loop that, maybe also bake. Okay, then click apply. So we have 2 new sets of animation. Okay, next go to our animator here, and I'm going to maximize our animator window so we can see it clearly. And then I'm going to create a new float parameters called y speed, and then another trigger parameter called on ladder. Okay, so we are going to use a blend 3 state, and we haven't used this before because we don't need it before, and now for the ladder animation we are going to need to use blend 3, so we can blend the ladder climbing animation with the ladder freeze animation. So go inside our blend 3 here by double clicking it, and then click our blend 3. We have to minimize the window, so we have this inspector here, and go to our motion list here, click plus, add motion field, add 2 different motion field. And for the first one I'm going to choose our ladder, where is it, our ladder climbing. Okay, our ladder freeze here from our Boxman 2 FBX. And then for the second one I'm going to add, or maybe just drag from our asset folder here. So go back here, and then I'm going to drag the ladder climbing here. I'm going to uncheck the automate threshold and set this threshold from 0 to 1. This is already correct. But for the ladder climbing, I'm going to set the animation speed to 2, so it will play faster. And for the parameter we are going to use the Y speed. Okay, go back to our base layer here, and then from any state we are going to make a transition to blend 3, and I'm going to rename this blend 3 to ladder climbing blend 3. And then for the transition I'm going to check on ladder, and I'm going to create a transition from this blend 3 back to idle by checking by using the ground to true. So let's save the scene, and then we are going to create a new animation event for our ladder climbing. So go to our character and go to the animation. Okay, next create a new state here and set the state to ladder climbing. And create a new global event, maybe call it anim ladder, and then I'm going to check this, make sure it's a broadcast or global event, and set that global event as a global transition here, anim ladder. Okay, first on ladder climbing we are going to trigger this trigger parameter on ladder. So I'm going to use set animator, sorry, I'm going to search for set animator trigger here, specify game object here, and I'm going to choose the mechanism character here, and then here I'm going to copy paste the parameter name. Okay, and I'm going to set animator bool, also change the game object, and I'm going to copy this grounded sorry, value to false, so I'm going to leave the value unchecked. Okay, and then I'm going to create a new float or and we name this variable character velocity y, and set float value here, character velocity y to our global vertical axis every frame here, and then I'm going to multiply the float multiply here, and the value I found works nicely is 1.5 here, so we make sure that the character velocity y is going bigger, but you can test it on your own for your own scene if it's working or not. So I'm going to leave the value to 1.5, and if it's not working you can change this value, or maybe change the disable the action if you don't need this. But for this scene, this character, I need to multiply the character velocity y value, and then I'm going to use the float absolute value and make sure that the character velocity y always positive. So check that every frame. This is also every frame here, and the float value, set float value every frame, and then set animator float here, animator float here, and for the y speed parameter we are going to feed our character velocity y float variable, and then check every frame here. So that will be all for ladder climbing animation event. Go back to our ladder climbing here. Here on wait we are going to send the event to our mechanism animation, and I'm going to choose idle and run here. I'm going to copy this event and also paste that action here and set it to idle and run also. But here I'm going to paste this, I'm going to copy this again, and then I'm going to paste this state here and move it on to the top, and then change the send event to anim ladder. Okay, let's save the scene and let's see if it's working. Going to our there you go. You can see that it's working nicely, but we cannot go down because we haven't set how we haven't set on how to disable when we are on top of the collider. So how we are going to disable this collider here when we are on top. So let's do that quickly. Choose the character, go to our ladder raycast here. So this is what we have right now, raycast, and I'm going to add another action on the first state and get key down here, and I'm going to choose down arrow. Okay, that is the bottom, and then I'm going to create a new event called press down and add that transition press down, and upon pressing I'm going to go to press down here, and then on press down we are going to raycast. I'm going to copy this action we have created before and paste it and set the direction to -1 and the distance to 1, and I'm going to store the hit object to hit collider also. Raycast down, I'm going to change its name to raycast down, and then I'm going to copy this game object compare tag. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to disable also the collider. So I'm going to add a transition disable collider, and then I'm going to copy this state here down to up disable collider, copy this state, paste this, and then change this up to down disable collider. So we know this state are going to handle the float compare a bit different. So connect the disable collider to the state here, and for this state we are going to change this action here, float compare. So we are going to set the greater than back to none and less than to finish, and then we are going to connect this to our enable collider here. I'm going to save the scene, and hopefully it's all working good. Let's see. Okay, there you go, it's working nicely. And oh, it's not working. Let's see what went wrong. Go back to our ladder raycast here. Okay, upon pressing down it detect our ground detect object here. So we need to make sure that this ground detects are getting ignored. So let's fix that. Okay, so in order to make sure that this ground detect are not gonna get detected with our raycast, change it layer to ignore raycast. Okay, so let's see now it's working. Going to move character. Yes, of course it's already working here, and yeah, it's working, but it felt right away. So here how we fix the falling problem. Choose the character and go to the ladder climbing FSM. I'm going to delete this ascend transition and then create a new global event, maybe call it climb, and then assign this that event as a global transition to climb here. And for the get key down, both of this action, change the send event to climb. Okay, and then the next step, we are going to modify this ladder raycast a bit. Here I'm going to copy this get key down and paste this action inside the raycast down, but I'm going to change the key to up arrow. So upon pressing up arrow, the event will be executed. Yeah. And then create a new event called press up. I've already created here, as you can see. And then change the send event to press up. So add that transition to the this raycast down state, and then connect that transition back to raycast up. We need this state because if we press down here and go to the state, and suddenly we change our mind and we want to go back up again, this will not be executed. So we cannot get through the collider without because the raycast is going straight down. Okay, after that I'm going to add a new send event inside this up to down disable collider. So drag the send event action, change the event target to game object FSM but use owner, and then under ladder climbing choose the FSM name to ladder climbing and send the event to climb. But I'm going to delay this action with the value 0.1 and then save the scene and let's run. Okay, see, and then let's try going down. Okay, it's working. So there we have a fully working ladder climbing system. I'm going to optimize a couple things a bit here on the character. Under the ladder climbing, go to the climbing state, and for the set velocity I'm going to uncheck or disable this use variable on the x-axis and leave the value to 0. So this way it will stop the horizontal movement right away when the characters try to climb the ladder. So it will make sure that the character doesn't move sideways when climbing. And okay, there you go, we have a nice functioning ladder system. I hope you enjoy this tutorial, and I've just released my game on Play Store, and please try it. You can see the trailer here on this button. Just click here. Well, if you like the tutorial, please subscribe, and I'll be making another tutorial soon. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. See ya.